They said I had promise once. Old professors patted my back with yellowed hands and told me my verse could shake mountains, that I had a gift, that rare thing that cuts through the fog of the world and leaves behind light. I believed them. I used to dream in meter. I saw stories in puddles, heard sonnets in the market bells, but poems don't pay rent. Not here, not here, not anywhere. And so I did what clever men do when fire meets famine. I sold myself by the word. They don't want poems, not really. They want spells, pretty ones, cheap ones, words tied with runes and meaning, and just enough shimmer to make a toothache vanish or a loaf of bread stay warm. I wrote a charm for the butcher once. Blood never spoils in his hooks now. Another for the washerwoman. The stains fade faster though her hands have grown raw. For every minor miracle, I charged a copper, sometimes two. Not enough to live well, but enough to live. I thought I'd feel empty. Instead I felt watched. The shadow appeared the first time I burned a page. It was a love poem, one I wrote for no one. It sat too long in my coat, softening with sweat, curling at the edges. I tossed it into the brazier, and from the smoke it came. Not a goblin, not really, not claws and warts and teeth. It had shape but no face, eyes but no shine. It was my height, my weight. It walked as I walked, and when I moved it stayed a half step behind, always behind. It didn't speak, not at first, just lingered. When I woke at night, it was in the corner. When I wrote spells it leaned over my shoulder. When I tried to write verse again, true verse, the kind that once thrilled me, it hissed, a sound like paper tearing, like memory drowning. Soon dreams stopped coming. I forgot how to write without payment. Even my own thoughts began to rhyme in petty enchantments. My hands itched if I tried to write for beauty instead of coin. And the shadow, it smiled. Then the visions began. Little things at first. A mirror clouded with ink. My face in puddles smeared into grotesque masks. The paper I used to write my spell contracts began curling into shapes. Faces I once dreamed of. Characters from poems I'd never finish. They wept. They screamed. They bled ink. I went to the temple once, just to see if they could cleanse me. The priest looked into my eyes and said, "You've been edited." He offered no blessing, only pity. The shadow began to talk, not with words, with lines. Lines I had written years ago. But what if I disappear between the stanzas? It asked. Will anyone remember me once I am unwritten? I screamed. No one came. I stopped selling spells, moved to the edge of town, tried to write just for me, a single line each day. No magic, no coin. But the shadow grew restless. It whispered doubts, made my ink run dry, turned my dreams to rot. One night I followed it, down alleys, over roofs slick with rain. It led me to the grocer's stall, closed for the night, but in the window dozens of slips of parchment, my spells taped to jars, bags, bottles, each one signed in my hand. And inside every spell, the shadow grinned. It had taken my discards, my scraps, my forgettable rhymes, and made them permanent, bound them to the bones of the city. Now they were all that remained of me, and they were wrong, soulless, half-breathed things. I stumbled back to my room and found the brazier cold. I knelt before the last poem I had ever written, the one that still lived, barely on fraying parchment. A poem about flight, about escape, about ink that could become wings. The shadow stood behind me, silent, waiting. I read the poem aloud, line by line. My voice cracked, but the room warmed. The shadow shrieked, a sound like every forgotten verse screaming for air, and then silence. When I looked up it was gone, not banished, just waiting. It always waits. For the next time I trade magic for meaning, art for coin, heart for ease. But now, I write again, just a little, just enough to remember who I was before the shadow learned my name, before I let myself become less. And every night I lock the door, not to keep the world out, but to keep the ink in, where it belongs. They were caked in mud when I found them, half buried in the ruins outside Brelholm. I just crawled out of the wreckage of another battle, ears ringing, blade broken, brothers dead or fled. The field was strewn with fire, glass and bone, and I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My hands shook, my mouth tasted of copper and dust. And there they were, the boots, old leather, blackened and thick, laced with fraying cords and stamped with no maker's mark. The soles glowed faintly, as if lit from beneath by something pulsing and alive. I didn't think. I pulled them on, and everything changed. Fire wished I were warm, just a flicker of thought, nothing spoken. The battlefield was gone. I stood in a cottage I'd never seen, hearth fire blazing, stew bubbling. A dog thumped its tail at my feet. A woman I didn't know called me love, and set a bowl in front of me. My hands were clean, my clothes whole, the boots still on my feet. I stayed in that life for 3 days. Then I thought, what if I'd stayed in the army longer, risen in rank? And when I blinked, I was a general, defined coat on my shoulders, soldiers saluting me, a map spread before me, marked in my own handwriting. But the woman was gone, and the dog, and I couldn't remember their names. Had I given them names? The boots grant you whatever you want, whatever you wish. But every time I changed the world, something was missing. Just one thing, one vital thread pulled from the weave. In one life I was a noble drinking wine beneath chandeliers, my name sung by poets. But I had no shadow, none, not in firelight, not in moonlight, and it terrified me. That another, I was a child again, before the war, before the blood. I laughed. I ran through the orchard behind my family's cottage, but my father's face was blank, a smooth stretch of skin where eyes and mouth should be. My mother was a voice in another room I could never reach. The boots responded to every flicker of desire, comfort, glory, power, but always twisted, always wrong. They gave me everything, except what mattered. My sight tried to wish my way back to the battlefield, to the blood and the truth of pain. But the boots didn't understand back. It gave me a memory of war, with no other people in it. A battlefield where I stood alone beneath an unbreaking sky, surrounded by frozen echoes of corpses that didn't move, didn't rot. I screamed, and the world changed again. After a while I forgot what I'd originally looked like. I'd been tall, or short, bearded, clean-shaven. My name changed each time someone spoke to me, so I stopped asking. I stopped speaking. I just walked through realities, one after another, hoping the next one would feel true. But truth doesn't grow in wish soil, and I had no shovel, only the boots, and the boots never stopped listening. In one life, I was alone in a golden city. Statues lined every street, all of them my face. The sky bowed when I looked up. The wind sang my victories, but I couldn't feel heat, or cold, or hunger, or anything. Did another. I was loved by everyone, adored, celebrated, but none of them knew me. Their eyes passed over the surface of my skin like water on glass. Their love was a program, pre-written, not earned. I tried to die. Once, I stepped into a river and wished to be gone. The boots turned the water into silk, and set me gently on the bank. Another time, I threw myself from a tower, wished for an end. The ground became feathers. I landed laughing and weeping. I began to wish nothing, to feel nothing, to walk in silence, breath shallow, heart dim. But even then, the boots shifted things, turning wind to song, turning stone to velvet. They were trying to help, and that was the worst part. One morning, I think it was morning, I found a child in a burning house. She screamed as I approached, not in fear, in recognition. "You're not real," she sobbed. "You're just a wish." I tried to reach her. The fire froze in midair, time stuttered, and I realized she was right. I wasn't real anymore, just a ripple, a reaction. I sat down, and I said aloud, for the first time in years, "I don't want anything." And the world stopped, truly stopped. The wind ceased, the sky held its breath, and the boots were silent. I took them off. My feet bled. They were smaller than I remembered, bones brittle, skin pale. I was old, older than I should have been, or maybe just worn thin by too many lives, too many selves. I burned the boots, or I think I did, watched them dissolve into smoke that spelled out all the names I'd once answered to, none of them mine, all of them me. Defaults. Now I live in a world that doesn't shift, where hunger aches, where warmth comforts, where people have shadows and names and arguments, where I do not always win, but I feel it all, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes I dream of the boots, and sometimes I wake with the old temptation, but I never follow it, because I've learned this. A wish is just a lie you tell the world, but too many lies, and the world stops listening, and so I speak truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because pain means I'm real, and real means I'm still mine. It was lying in the gutter when I found it, half covered in leaves, soot-streaked, its glass panes dull with grime. A simple brass lantern, dented at the rim, its handle bent like a crooked finger. The city street was quiet that evening. The rain had come and gone, and the lamps were all lit, except this one. I should have walked past, but something about it made me stop. I bent to pick it up, and the moment my fingers touched the brass, a spark leapt through my skin. It flared to life. A cold white flame danced inside, flickering without fuel, soundless and pure, and in its glow the street changed. The world didn't darken, only twisted. The cobblestones beneath my feet shimmered like oil on water. The windows of the houses no longer hid behind curtains. I saw a man standing motionless in the third-story window of a bakery, mouth smeared with blood. I saw a mother in the alley nursing not a baby, but something writhing in gray. I saw my own hands, and under the skin, tiny crawling things blinking. I dropped the lantern. The light vanished. The street was ordinary again, but I couldn't forget what I saw. I brought it home, tucked it under my coat, hid it beneath the floorboards. I told myself I wouldn't light it again, but it whispered, not in words, just presence. Wait, promise. The truth is a drug. Once tasted, you hunger, and I hungered. The second time I lit it, I was in the temple. The priest was kneeling, reciting the blessings. The lantern's flame leapt high. His mouth moved, but his voice came out in reverse. His robes rippled like skin, and in the reflection of the sacred font I saw him laughing as he poured ash over a child's cradle. The congregation never noticed, but I did. Everywhere I took the lantern, it revealed what hid in the seams. Beneath the baker's flour was bone dust. Behind the lover's smile, betrayal bloomed like mold. In the quietest part of the library, a boy read books that weren't written in ink but in screams. The city was not sick. It had always been like this. The lantern didn't curse people, it just showed them. They call truth a virtue. They lie. Truth is a wound, and I kept tearing it open. I stopped sleeping. Every night, I lit the lantern in new places. Markets, sewers, towers. People glowed with false halos or hissed with unseen mouths. Sometimes the light showed only sadness. Sometimes it showed things with no names. Once I saw a girl who had no shadow, only a tangle of broken promises stitched into her footsteps. She saw me staring. She smiled and vanished. Eventually, I held the lantern up to myself, just once, in the mirror. I told myself I could handle it, but I was wrong. The flame hissed as it climbed the glass, and I saw, not sin, not evil, but emptiness. A hollow boy stuffed with borrowed words shaped by shame and silence. A mask with eyes. I didn't eat for days after that. The hunger wasn't in my stomach, it was in my knowing. People noticed, not what I carried. No one could see the lantern unless I willed it, but they noticed me, gaunt, wide-eyed, muttering to walls that had mouths. They whispered, mad, they whispered, cursed. They were right, but they didn't understand why. I tried to destroy the lantern. Hammer, fire, river. It endured, its flame never dimmed, because it wasn't mine. It belonged to truth, and I had become its bearer. I fled the city, into the woods, the marshes, the old roads, lit the lantern in the ruins of castles, in the graves of forgotten kings. Each time, it revealed more than I wished to know, that no throne was earned, that every hero had blood under their nails, that even the stars above were watching, indifferent and old. One night, I met a man at a crossroads, cloaked in shadow, face like a half-remembered story. He looked at the lantern, and then at me. "You still carry it?" he asked. "What else can I do?" I said. He touched my chest, then stopped pretending to see. "You past seeing long ago, you are what's seen now," and he left me. I haven't spoken since. What use are words when you know the rot beneath them? I walk, and I light the lantern, and I see everything, even when I don't want to, especially then. I used to believe truth would set me free. Now I know. Truth binds, like light through a magnifying glass. Focused, sharp, burning. I see you reading this, and I wonder if I lit the lantern near you, what would I find? They say ghosts don't feel cold. I used to wonder if that was true. Huddled in alleys and under broken eaves while the snow bit through rags like knives. I used to imagine what it would be like. Not to shiver, not to ache, not to need. But I've learned something worse. Ghosts remember warmth, and they want it back. It started with the embers. They weren't mine. Not really. I found them in a rusted tin buried in the ashes of the ruined chapel, deep in the quarter where even rats feared to tread. The tin was blackened with old soot, sealed with wax. Inside were coals, still glowing. Somehow, they pulsed with a strange light, not orange, but pale blue and deep red, like blood frozen under glass. I should have left them. Instead, I sold one. Nisa, a woman in mourning robes, stopped me on the street. Her eyes were cracked and hollow. "Do you have any flame?" she whispered. I offered her one of the embers. She stared at it. "It's warm." She paid me in silver. Then she cupped the ember in trembling hands. It didn't burn her, but I saw her eyes change. She looked through the snow, past the gray sky. "Leorin," she breathed. "My son." She wept and smiled, and the ember flared once, then vanished. When I touched the tin again, the embers inside pulsed faster, and I began to see things. That night, I lit one to keep the frost from my fingers. The warmth was like nothing I'd ever known. Not fire, something older. It soaked into my skin, into my bones. I sighed and curled closer, and then I saw him. Me, but not this me. Clean, fed, sitting at a hearth beside a woman with my eyes and a man with my chin. A home, a family. I watched them laugh. I watched me reach for stew. The ember winked out, and I was alone again. Me, sir. I kept selling them. They were in demand. Word spread fast. The poor came first, desperate to see children or lovers or mothers lost. The rich came after, curious, then obsessed. Each one lit the ember and saw something different. Not just the dead, but lives that could have been. And every time they used one, they looked colder afterward, like the ghosts had taken something from them, like they'd left a part of themselves behind. I should have stopped, but I was so hungry, so I burned another. Just one. This time I saw a tower, a warm bed, velvet drapes, me again, older, noble, laughing with lords and ladies. No more hunger, No more cold. The vision ended, but I felt it linger. A pull, a whisper. You belong here. The embers began to hum at night. They shifted in the tin like coals disturbed by wind, and the air grew thick with whispers. Low voices behind the walls, footsteps in snow that wasn't falling. I tried to stop selling them. I buried the tin in a drain pipe, but they came anyway. The mourners, the seekers, the cold. A man cornered me near the docks, coat crusted with ice. His eyes were glazed. Give me another, he rasped. I saw her. I need to go back. I told him they were gone. He wept, then laughed, then walked into the river and didn't come out. The embers came back. I woke one morning, and the tin was by my side again, open, and inside, more than before, dozens, hundreds. I hadn't counted them before. Now I couldn't stop. I lit one. I couldn't help it. This time I saw myself at sea, free, wild, laughing on the rigging with salt wind in my teeth. Then snap, gone. Another, a scholar, robed in rune ink speaking to kings. Gone. Another, married, smiling, holding a child who called me Papa. Gone, gone, gone. The world around me began to thin. The snow didn't melt anymore, even near the flames. Shadows gathered even in daylight, and always, the same faces lingered on the edge of my sight. Mine, from the visions watching. They didn't blink, they didn't breathe, but they hungered. Ty tried to burn the tin. I hurled it into a pyre outside the city walls stoked with stolen oil and prayers. It hissed, and when the fire died, it was still there, waiting. I don't remember the last time I ate. I don't feel hunger now, only the pull, the warmth, and the cold just beyond it. Tonight, I sit in the alley behind the candle merchant's hall. Snow falls in soft spirals. The wind has teeth, but I hold an ember in my palm. It glows faint. I was born from a knife's whisper and a father's tears. He carved me from heartwood, curled and smoothed with care. Only grief can guide. His hands were cracked with age, his eyes red-rimmed, and his shop smelled of dust and cedar. He spoke to me as he worked, not nonsense, but memories. You'd have had your mother's eyes, he muttered, sanding my face smooth. Your smile would have bent the world. I didn't know what he meant. Not then, not yet. He shaped me no taller than a man's hand, limbs fine and nimble, with joints that clicked softly like a wind chime. My chest was hollow, save for a crystal sliver set where a heart might go. He poured something into that place, hope, or maybe sorrow, when he whispered the name he'd chosen, one he'd given before once, to a child buried too soon. I opened my eyes, and breathed. The dollmaker wept when he saw me move. Not with horror, not with wonder, just quiet, weary joy. You're home now, he said. You're safe. But I wasn't. In the kingdom of Halvarin, dolls like me were forbidden, declared abominations by decree, mockeries of life. They called us traps for wandering souls. They told tales of puppets turned violent, of golems that devoured their masters, of dolls who whispered at night and grew fangs by day. I didn't have fangs. I didn't want violence. I just wanted to be his. We lived in secret. By day, I stayed still on a velvet cushion in the front room. By night, he taught me letters with chalk on old wood. I danced on the table while he played the lute. He told me stories, and I asked questions he didn't always want to answer. Why don't I grow? Why do you cry when you look at me? What was the first me like? He never answered that one. They came for him when I was 3 winters old, not children's winters, mine. The inquisitors had heard whispers, glimpsed me moving through the shutters. They stormed the shop in red robes and silver masks, blades that hummed with runes. He told me to hide. He begged me to stay still. But when they struck him, I moved. I threw myself at them, fists of splinter and thread. I screamed in my tiny voice, "Leave him." He's all I have. They shattered me. A boot crushed my chest. A blade sheared my leg. My maker wept again, and then he was gone. I don't remember what happened next. Just darkness, then fire, then a box. When I awoke, I was no longer in Halvarin. I had been sold to a collector, a duke with a taste for cursed things. He kept me in a glass case beside a jar of manticore teeth, and a painting that blinked when no one watched. I could move only when he said the word, a command word, like a leash. He made me dance for guests, spill wine into goblets, crawl across polished tables like a trained insect. But I listened, and I learned. I escaped on the back of a sparrow, a palace servant kind and limping, left my case ajar one night. I whispered thanks and leapt. The sparrow had seen me dance, said she liked my spirit. She flew me far into the marshes. She said, "You don't belong to anyone now." I asked her, "Then who do I belong to?" She didn't answer. Others found me, a mole priest who tried to gild me in gold leaf and call me divine, a toad merchant who tied threads to my arms and sold tickets to see the wooden wonder, a clockmaker who pried open my chest muttering, "How does it tick?" Each time I fled, each time a piece of me broke. I lost a hand, then an eye, then the shard of crystal in my chest cracked. I couldn't breathe right after that. My movements grew sluggish, the spark inside dimmed, and I thought, maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't real. In a forest of silver birch, I found the ruins of a shrine, old stones, broken altar, forgotten gods. There I collapsed. The moss grew over my limbs. I let it. But one night, beneath a full moon, something called, not a voice, a sound, carving, a child, hands stained with soot and sap, trying to shape a whistle from wood, failing, crying. I remembered my father's hands. I stood, and I walked. The boy screamed when he saw me, but I smiled, crooked and broken. "I won't hurt you," I said. "I just want to help." He let me. Together we carved the whistle. I showed him how to follow the grain, how to breathe warmth into the wood. When it sang, he laughed, and something inside me clicked. Not in pain, in healing. He brought me home. His mother screamed, then wept. Not in fear, in recognition. She'd lost a daughter once, she said. She saw her in my face. Not the features, the hope. They let me stay, with new wood, new joints. A glass eye gifted from a fallen statue, a copper hand shaped from an old kettle, no longer perfect, but wholly mine. And inside my chest I placed a new shard, not crystal, mirror, so I could look in and always remember what I was, and what I chose to become. They still tell stories of me, the living doll, the cursed boy, but I know the truth now. I was carved by grief, yes, but I was shaped by love, and I remade myself in defiance. Not a puppet, not a plaything, a person, free. I remember the first time I burned. The spark came with a whisper. A prayer stammered through chattering teeth. In a temple grown too cold, the flame kissed the wick at the top of my head, and I awoke, not like a man wakes from slumber, more like a blade drawn from its sheath. My body, wax, shaped like a knight of old, no taller than a child's hand, grew warm. My limbs flexed. The sword molded into my fist, gleamed with firelight, and I moved. The child who lit me stumbled back in awe, his wide eyes shining beneath his acolyte's hood. "You're real," he breathed. I wanted to speak, to say, "Only while the flame lasts," but wax does not make room for wasted words. The temple was dying. I could feel it in the stone, once sanctified, now cracked. The sun no longer touched the altar. Moss crept where light should reign, and the shadows, gods, the shadows, they came each night, crawling, slithering, shaped like men, beasts and horrors with too many limbs. They craved the heat, the flame, they craved me. Each battle melted me. I swung my blade through smoke-skinned monsters. They hissed and shrieked, vanishing into curling mist, but every strike cost me something. A finger, a shoulder, the shine of my chest. Still, I fought, because the child watched me. He never ran, not even when the shadows screamed his name. He lit me again and again, each night whispering, "Please protect us." And so I did. The other candles in the temple were long dead. Only I remained. My once stalwart legs had withered unevenly. One had melted entirely in a clash with a shadow bird whose beak dripped poison. I stood lopsided now, leaning always, dragging myself along with the memory of balance. But the child still lit me. He still believed, and the shadows grew bolder. One night, they breached the sanctum. The door exploded inward, and smoke poured in like a flood. The child screamed. I stood, unsteady, flickering, my body thin as reed grass, but my sword still burned. They came in a tide, too many. I cut through the first, the second, the fifth, but I felt myself shrinking. Wax splashed the floor. My left arm fell in a heap. Still I fought. The child clung to the altar, sobbing prayers. A shadow with eyes of dying stars reached for him, and I knew, I will not last another strike. I had a choice: extinguish my own flame, let it gutter out, save what little remained of me, survive, or burn, all of me. One last blaze, enough to drive them all back, enough to save him. I had turned to the boy. He looked at me through tears. "Please," he whispered. I nodded, and I stepped into the center of the room. My head drove my sword into the stone. I lifted my one good arm, and I burned. I summoned the last of my wax and will. My flame flared, white hot. Light filled the room. The shadows screamed, not in rage, but in fear. They burst apart like dry leaves. Smoke fled from stone. The air cleared, and I melted. The boy ran to where I'd stood. Only wax remained, a puddle, and my sword, cooled and cracked. He wept. He cupped my wick in trembling hands, pressing it to his chest. "I'll remember you," he said, "always." That was the end, but not of me. A soldier's purpose is not to live, it is to choose how to burn. And I chose. I burned for him,